In a world reshaped by disruption and driven by innovation, one summit has stood at the forefront of transformation: the Times Group ET Now Global Business Summit. Since 2015, this prestigious platform has brought together the brightest minds, visionary leaders, policymakers, and global pioneers to chart the course of business and society. With India's Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi as a guiding force, GBS has ignited bold conversations, unveiling groundbreaking strategies that drive progress and prosperity. As GBS 2025 takes center stage under the theme Evolve, Emerge, Expand, the world's foremost thought leaders explored the seismic shifts shaping the global economy and shed light on how can nations adapt. How can businesses thrive? How do we expand possibilities in an interconnected world? This is where the future is reimagined. In this episode, Philip Morris International's Frederick De Wilde engaged in an informative conversation with ET Now's Aisha Faridi, focusing on tobacco industry and its future in an aptly titled session, Bridging Borders, Advancing Global Trade and Investment.
Let me start off with, you man a vast region, right? You're talking about independent states from within the Commonwealth, Middle East, the Africa region. Tell me, how do countries with very different demographics, with very different policies, with very different people and boundaries, collaborate together to try and advance global trade?
Look, I think global trade has been challenged recently. I think there are commonalities. In my company, we are operating in more than 150 countries, right? So I think many of us went through the challenges of COVID when we had to restructure the supply chain. Unfortunately, we had to go to some conflicts as well, which in our case, we had to focus always first on our employees, try to make sure that we keep them safe, sometimes relocate them, but also we tried to manage our supply because there is a peculiarity in the tobacco sector. People want their products, and if supply chain is disrupted, this opens the door to what we call illicit trade, contraband, which on the one hand deprives the states from their finances, but also opens the financing of sometimes criminal rings, right? So these are the commonalities, I guess, with many of the people in the audience here. There is a peculiarity in the tobacco sector. People might believe we have trade across the world. What are the challenges for us? The number one challenge is regulation. And I'm not talking about regulation from what you would see as a sector which cigarettes is the norm. I want to talk about what the industry is going through across the world, a significant change. We started 20 years ago with a challenge, right? And we saw people are smoking. The challenge was, how could we, for the people who continue smoking or do not quit, could we come with a solution with products that they would adhere to, but at the same time might have the potential to reduce the risk? So we searched in many areas there, and we quickly understood that the main issue for when people smoke is the combustion. When you combust your product, this is the moment where you create thousands of substances, some of them cancerogenic, and we put all our research and innovation in trying to get rid of combustion. Took a long time. We piloted products, we put science behind it, because on the one hand, we needed product that people would accept. On the other hand, we had to prove that these products would reduce the toxicity, the exposure, and ultimately the risk to people. And after years of research, we hired 500 scientists from around the world. We were not used to that as a tobacco company. We built a very solid scientific package. We started launching our products 10 years ago now in several geographies in the world where we partner with the governments. And I'm glad to say that we sort of disrupted ourselves from the inside. We can see in certain countries that one day traditional cigarette smoking will not exist anymore. And I'm glad to report that in the last quarter, 40% of our net revenues were coming from these better alternatives. So it's a significant shift. I think it's a case study of a company that was very successful, but that is disrupting itself from the inside for the good of their users, for the good of public health. And hence, this is something totally new. Not easy for government to understand. It requires a scientific understanding. It requires changes in the regulation. We've seen very nice partnerships around the world in many countries. We are not yet there in India. We are engaging with the government, but I think we really would love to have a regulatory environment in India where we could bring these products to the people that are smoking here.
That's quite interesting. And, you know, it's a very unique business, yours. It's not need and urgency based, it's addiction. That's what tobacco is, right? So tell me, I mean, let's talk about India. What are the challenges that you face? You did talk about regulation, but where do you see a market like India? And again, you know, your business per se, the one commonality across countries is addiction. If you're addicted to tobacco, you're addicted to tobacco. You know, we're talking about a growing India, per capita income is increasing, people are going ahead for premiumization, it's the top of the pyramid which is doing well. Does that impact your brand as well?
Look, I think first thing that we should mention is that people should not smoke.
Yes,
should not.
Feels very right.
That's what you would tell your families, your friends, right? Now, if they smoke, they should quit. But some people continue smoking and some people cannot quit. And I think with the product we've got around now, with the proof that these products are working, our duty is to bring new alternative products to the people who cannot quit. We've been doing that in several countries in the world.
Tell me
not
more
yet
about
in
these
India.
alternative products.
So I was saying these are products that are not combusting. They can take the form of heated tobacco products. They can take the form of nicotine pouches. And the very interesting fact there is that we see good traction in many places. And we also see results. So I can give you a couple of examples. Before being in this position, I was president of Japan and then president of the European Union, right? In Japan, since the introduction of these products, alternatives, the total cigarette business, combustible cigarette business, has been halving. Half. In Europe, take a city in Italy like Rome. In Rome, a third of the smokers have switched to these alternatives. And a very interesting case study is the one of Sweden. The alternatives, these little pouches, were introduced like 30 years ago. You look at the results now in Sweden, Sweden has the lowest smoking incidence in Europe, around 5%. Amongst 20 to 30, it's almost negligible. Look at the results now from a health perspective. When you look at the lung cancer amongst men, Sweden is the lowest level of lung cancer amongst men incidence in the European Union. So we've got proof, on the one hand, that these products can be accepted by smokers. It's a change of behaviors, but we've been investing $14 billion on our science, our research, but also on our commercial efforts to inform people about it. So it works across the world. These products are not yet available in India. We need to keep partnering with the government to make them available. But it's a major challenge. Sometimes people in the room would say, okay, smoking, this is tobacco, I know it. You know, there are more than 1 billion people smoking in the world. There are 300 million people using tobacco in India, 100 million smokers. So being capable for the ones who cannot quit to come with better alternatives where the toxicity is reduced by more than 90%, it is more than a business for us. It's a mission.
Quite interesting. You did talk about the numbers in India, right? Where is it that you see hurdles or regulatory challenges, if at all, when it comes to a market like India, because it's such a large, addressable base for a company like yours?
Look, we heard yesterday in all the panels and certainly in the speech of the Honorable Prime Minister that, first of all, the results are stellar, but there is a lot of work behind it, and we've heard the speed at which regulation has changed in many sectors. Talk about banking, energy, mobile phones. So speed is important, right? And when speed is there, investments comes, development comes. And as I was saying before, sometimes the tobacco sector is seen as an old sector, people smoke, not much can be done about it. As I mentioned before, we have the capability now to make drastic change in smokers' life, but also in public health overall. So today we still have a foreign direct investment ban in India, but with this new technology, with this new science that we could bring, not leaving the 300 million tobacco users in India behind, I think we could go through a Wixit buyout also for the tobacco sector in India, and we would be more than willing to invest here once the appropriate regulatory framework would be in place. And as mentioned by the Prime Minister yesterday, in terms of public health and policies, of course, India is a significant partner worldwide, but I think India could also shape this regulation worldwide, and that's what we are looking for.
But when a company such as yours decides to invest and get into a country, tell me what factors, what parameters actually sort of guide you to invest more in a country? And let's start off with the India example.
Look, first thing obviously is the domestic market, and it's not negligible in India, right? But it goes beyond the domestic market. I think in India, the moment we might be able to bring these products, we know that the workforce quality, the talents that we find here, that by the way we have in our company in India, but also many Indians outside India, is a key parameter. But it goes beyond that, because with the scale of India capabilities, we are sure that we can create economies of scales and innovation there, which would make India for us a hub for exports. And there is another peculiarity in our sector. This is all about the tobacco growers, right? Yeah. And in our case, India is one of the top tobacco growing country in the world. Sometimes it's not well known. We are partnering with all these growers with one thing in mind. We are implementing good agricultural practices with these people. And what we have in mind there is, first of all, help them to increase their productivity with the right equipment, the right technology. Second, try to minimize their own footprint in their communities. And the third one is to make sure that we ensure for these people, I would say, long-term sustainable revenue so that they can get the appropriate level of income for themselves and for their families. So that's very peculiar for our sector.
Well, I hope you get to a partnership with the Indian government soon and we see more alternatives here in India. Thank you so much, Frederick.
Welcome.
Pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
We're here at the sidelines of the Global Business Summit in New Delhi, and I'm in conversation with Frederick de Wilde, President with Philip Morris International of the SSEA, CIS, and MEA regions. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Frederick, you're of course part of the management team that has led this transformation towards smoke-free. When it comes to Philip Morris International, it's a huge shift. The industry has washed it with bated breath. How do you essentially manage the complexities of legacy business on the one hand, with the need to innovate by way of reduced risk products on the other?
Look, this journey started more than 20 years ago. And the challenge we were faced with was, could we find products, we were selling cigarettes, could we find products that would reduce the individual risk and the overall societal harm for the population, right?
Sure.
It was an easy question, very complicated challenge.
Right.
And we went in many different directions until we found out that the main issue was combustion, creating thousands of substances, many of those being cancerogenic, right? So the challenge there was, can we find and develop a product that would not burn, but at the same time would satisfy consumers?
Sure.
Because you can develop the best product in the world if you have no consumer acceptance, this would not work, right? So 10 years ago, we tried before pilots, didn't work, the product was not satisfactory, too bulky, and 10 years ago, I think we found the right candidate. And the good sign there was that many of the people involved in the company had switched from smoking to these products. And we said, we are ready to go.
We're on to something.
So 10 years ago, we started launching the product,
right,
where we saw very good traction. In the meantime, we were building a very rigorous scientific package as of day one. And we thought that we had balanced the equation. On the one hand, we had the proof in our science that these products are less toxic and are better product. On the other hand, we could see consumers being ready to move and go for this product. So it was not necessarily a big challenge in the company, because when you sell a product
Sure.
and you have an available product, new product that you can launch and that has the potential to reduce the harm, I think it goes without saying that you will be all in this product, right? And that's what happened when I was in the European Union region. We launched in many countries. We saw quite a nice traction, and the company went all in. We spent $14 billion to develop the science, the product, and launch the product in markets in the last 10 years.
Right.
And in the last quarter, I think 40% of our turnover was coming from this product. So it's an interesting case study. We looked around. Very few multinational companies disrupted themselves from the inside as we did.
Sir, I think you've gotten it absolutely right. And if I could do a bit more of a deep dive.
Sure.
You inherently have a global perspective because of the diverse regions that you manage. So how challenging has it been for Philip Morris International to essentially align its smoke-free vision, its smoke-free strategy with countries that have such a broad range of cultural and consumer and regulatory nuances?
Yes, I think regulatory comes first. We cannot launch these products without the support of the authorities.
Right.
These products deserve a specific regulatory framework where science is looked at, communication with consumers are looked at, taxation is different.
Sure.
So we need support from the authorities, and we see different perspectives in the world. Many countries, certainly in Europe where I was working before, have adhered to a sort of harm reduction strategy on tobacco,
Sure.
and have created specific tax categories and regulatory regimes for these products. When this happens, this paves the way for us to invest, talk to consumers, and convert them. There are still some countries in the world where the product is either not looked at or sometimes even banned de facto.
Right.
India makes part of this category. So we are here to work with the authorities to demonstrate all the things we've done around, to be transparent, and eventually bring these alternatives to the smokers in these spaces, particularly in India. And I looked at some of the data, and it goes against logic, because in the countries where these products are banned, actually you see the cigarette business growing. And in other countries, you see exactly the opposite. You see that the cigarette business is decreasing, and the new products are taking advantage.
Well, I think that makes for a wonderful segue into my next question, which is, Frederick, do you believe that the perception around harm reduction products is finally beginning to shift? You know, are people truly abandoning their cigarettes? And if so, do they perhaps prefer the more traditional alternatives?
Look, I think the perception is shifting, and I can give you some examples.
Please.
Prior to being in Europe, I was president of Japan. So we've introduced the product in Japan some 10 years ago. Today, the cigarette industry, smoking cigarette industry, is half of what it was before. So very huge adherence to these products.
Right.
In the European Union, also these products have made very good inroads. I looked at the numbers recently. In Italy, in Rome, a third, 30%, more than 30% of the tobacco users have moved to these alternatives. Another interesting example is the example of Sweden, where alternatives have been brought to the market like 30 years ago. When you look at the data in Sweden today, Sweden has the lowest smoking incidence rate across all European countries, around 5%. Amongst 20 to 30, it's almost negligible. And when you look at the impact of this, you see that the lung cancer incidence in Sweden is the lowest in the European Union. So this is typically a country where what we put on the table, which was looked at as being very dairy at the time, right. Could we see the end of cigarettes in the world? This is a place where this could happen.
And when we talk about the disruption, right, wherein Philip Morris International has essentially not just talked the talk, but walk the walk, right. What becomes so critical is the messaging. And how do you bring about trust and transparency in the messaging, given the diverse range of stakeholders, from consumers, public health advocates, regulators, and the list goes on?
Sure. Look, I think the answer is in the question. I think it's all about transparency. And, you know, we hired around 500 top scientists since we started this adventure and journey about new products, right? And these people didn't join to see more cigarettes being sold.
Right.
They joined there with their ethical standards to make this a reality. Second thing, our science, since we built it more than 10 years ago, is absolutely available. You can go on the net, you can look at our methodologies, at the results we do. But beyond that, since 10 years, we also have state agencies which have reviewed our science or portion of our science, more than 10. Sure. One very well-known one is the FDA in the United States, right, where they granted us, after reviewing thoroughly all our science, a market approval authorization to market the product there. So this is for state agencies. Now, I understand there is skepticism. Right. It's a tobacco company coming with its own science. So we've got our science transparent. We've got state agencies looking at it. But there is also more than 750 studies that have been done independently from us on this entire new product that we bring to the market. So I think from that angle, the transparency is there, and therefore the trust is coming. Now, from a consumer standpoint, first of all, I'd like to say that, and this is deeply embedded in our values, people should not smoke. They should not smoke. And if they smoke, they should quit. Unfortunately, some people want to continue smoking or cannot quit. Right. And this is why we are coming with these products, right? Second thing, minors should not have access, should not buy, and should not consume these products. Sure. This is also one of our critical values, things we do every day. People might be skeptical, but we are employees. Most of our employees have children. They don't want their children to see, touch, or consume any of the tobacco products. And when we embed this in the way we operate, in our communication, we embed transparency and responsibility, we see that we are moving the needle in many, many places.
Well, Frederick, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to speak with us and sharing such a rich range of insights from your personal and professional journey alike. We wish you and the larger PMI team all the continued success, sir.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.